All right, friends, so I've been out here at Saint Vincent College watching the Steelers camp practice after practice, and honestly, going in, I figured Mike McCarthy was just going to clean up a few things on offense, tighten up the play calling, nothing that was going to blow anybody's mind. But now, camp is wrapped. The final open practice is done, and what I watched out there was not some minor tweak to the old system. This is a completely different offensive identity than what this team is running years. And there's one specific piece of it that I don't think anybody else has really put a name to yet. So stick around, because I'm going to break down exactly what changed and why it matters so much heading into this season. Hello, Steelers fans. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Okay, so let me actually walk you through what I'm talking about here, because this didn't just hit me watching one snap. This built up practice after practice. The whole identity of this offense under Mike Tomlin for years was honestly kind of stubborn. It was this real conservative, we run what we run mentality, and I think it actually capped what this roster could do. What I'm seeing now from Mike McCarthy and his offensive coordinator, Brian Angelichio, is an offense that's actually built to attack the middle of the field, that's not scared to push the ball down the field, and that's leaning way more into 3 receiver looks instead of stacking 2 and 3 tight ends out there like we saw the last couple years. And look, under center play action is going to be a real staple of this thing too, especially on early downs, which is something Brian Angelichio is clearly bringing over from his time working with Kevin O'Connell up in Minnesota. So this isn't just a new play caller running the old stuff with a different voice. This is genuinely a different offensive philosophy, and I think that alone raises the ceiling on this whole team. Now, here's the thing, though. It's not just the offense that's getting a facelift out there. The defense is going through basically the same kind of transformation under Patrick Graham. And honestly, I think this side of the ball might end up being just as important to this team's identity this year. Under the old staff, you basically knew where everybody was lining up before the snap. That was kind of the whole approach. Patrick Graham is the total opposite of that. He wants to be multiple. He wants to disguise fronts. And I mean, he genuinely loves throwing different looks at quarterbacks. Sim pressures, all-out cover zero, fire zones, dropping guys you'd expect to blitz, and bringing guys you wouldn't. And when you look at the pieces he's got to work with for that kind of scheme, guys like Jalen Ramsey, Deshaun Elliott, and Jaquan Brisker at the back end, plus both his linebackers in Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen, this defense has real blitz threats from everywhere on the field. It's a split safety disguised structure now instead of that single high look we got used to for years, and I think that's going to show up in a big way once the games actually start counting. Now that brings me to the guy running this whole offense, Aaron Rodgers, because I think what I saw from him at camp this year is genuinely different than what we watched last season. Last year, his average depth of target was 5.9, which honestly was dead last among starters in the league, and I get why people were frustrated by that. But watching him out there this camp, he looks so much more comfortable, and I think that's leading to him actually pushing the ball down the field more. And there's a real reason for that. I mean, this is the offense he grew up in. This is McCarthy's system, so the terminology, the checks at the line, all of that is second nature to him now compared to still learning a brand new playbook last year. Add on top of that the fact he's actually got real weapons to throw to now with Michael Pittman Jr. and Jeremy Bernard in the mix, Roman Wilson finally playing the right spot in the slot, and Jonnu Smith no longer clogging up the tight end room, and you can see why he's not scared to let it rip anymore. Honestly, it reminds me a little of that stretch back in 2020 and 2021 when he was still winning MVPs with a heavy dose of under-center play action mixed in. And I'm not saying he's about to go win another MVP at this stage of his career, but I do think this could be his best season in years, and it's not close. And when I think about who benefits the most from Aaron Rodgers actually trusting his arm again, the first name that jumps out to me is DK Metcalf. This dude has been getting the ball constantly from Rodgers in camp, and it's clear that connection is fully built at this point. What I really like is how this offense is using him. A lot of over-the-middle work, digs, slants, the stuff that gets him the ball in space where he can just run through people. And because there's actual competition now for targets with Michael Pittman Jr. and Jeremy Bernard added to the room, defenses can't just bracket DK Metcalf on every single snap anymore. Rodgers himself has basically described his role in this offense as that number one guy role. And look, I'm not saying he's about to put up numbers like Rodgers had with his old #1 receiver back in his prime years, but I do think DK Metcalf is set up to have a monster season as the clear go-to target in this new system.
And speaking of guys who are finally clicking in this offense, I gotta bring up Roman Wilson, because this is a guy we've heard the training camp hype about before, and it hasn't always carried over. But this year feels different to me, and here's why. Once the pads actually came on in camp, he didn't take a step back like he did a year ago. Last year, when things got physical, he really struggled to hold up on the outside. But this camp, he's held his own even with the physicality turned up. And honestly, he looked like the clear #2 receiver on this roster throughout camp. Now, eventually, I think Michael Pittman Jr. probably settles into that #2 role once the season kicks off, but Roman Wilson has shown real growth as a route runner. He's got reliable hands, and he's using that speed to threaten defenses down the field. He actually reminds me a lot of a smaller, quicker slot guy that Rodgers has had success with in the past. That kind of build and skill set, and I think that bodes really well for him carving out a legit role as this offense's third option this year. Now shifting over to the other side of the quarterback room for a second, because I think what's happening with Drew Allar might be one of the more underrated storylines coming out of this camp. Everybody knew the arm talent was there coming out of college. That was never the question. The question was always whether he could clean up the consistency and the mental side of the game. And from what quarterbacks coach Tom Arth has said, the improvement in his fundamentals, specifically his footwork and playing on rhythm, has been noticeable fast. And it's not just talk either. We saw it show up on the field this past weekend when he lit it up against Green Bay's backups. 3 total touchdowns, no picks, and completing over 75% of his throws. Mike McCarthy has straight up said the front office viewed this kid as a first-round talent when they drafted him, and everything they've seen so far is backing that up. So when I look at where this is heading, I genuinely think Drew Allar is being groomed as this team's quarterback of the future, and I think that timeline might come quicker than people expect. Now, flipping back over to defense, because it's not just the scheme that's improved, the actual depth on this side of the ball is looking scary good. Up front, you've got Derek Harmon continuing to develop, Keanu Benton, who just locked in that long-term extension, showing this front office views him as a real building block, Yaya Black stepping in as a legit space-eating nose tackle, and Gabriel Rubio flat out balling out after basically nobody expected much from a 6th-round pick. At linebacker, Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson both looked noticeably more comfortable this camp, and I think a big reason for that is Patrick Graham's scheme lets them just play fast instead of overthinking every single assignment. And then behind them, you've got real quality depth too. Guys like Cole Holcomb and Ellendon Roberts, who've both played meaningful snaps for this team before. And honestly, the secondary might be the deepest group on the whole roster. Joey Porter Jr. and Jamel Dean on the outside, Asante Samuel Jr., who's honestly been one of the standout players of the entire camp, plus Brandon Eccles, Dalen Everett, Robert Spears-Jennings, and Rayshawn Jenkins all pushing for reps behind them. This is a unit that can survive injuries and still field a legitimate group. And out of that whole secondary, the guy I'm most fired up to watch this season is Jalen Ramsey. Last year was rough for him, honestly. Getting moved from corner to safety mid-year is not an easy adjustment for anybody. But this year, he's being used in this kind of chess piece role, almost like that old Charles Woodson usage where you're playing safety in your base looks, then sliding into the slot as basically a nickel corner in your nickel package, and then becoming an extra linebacker in your dime situations. That kind of versatility from one guy is rare, and when you combine that with how physical of a presence he is against the run, I think you're going to feel his impact all over this defense, even on plays where he's not the one making the tackle. One more name I want to touch on before I wrap this up is Robert Tonyan, because I think he's quietly playing his way onto this roster. He flashed that nice catch over the middle against a cover 2 look in the preseason game, and he's clearly built up real chemistry with both Will Howard and Drew Allar working with those backup units all camp. At this point, I'd honestly be surprised if he doesn't make the final roster as a depth tight end. Now, on the flip side, there's one guy whose path forward looks a lot rockier, and that's Kaleb Johnson. He was a good player at Iowa, nobody's questioning the talent, but this scheme under Mike McCarthy just doesn't seem like a natural fit for his skill set, the way it maybe would have been in the old offense. I just don't see where Kaleb Johnson fits on this roster right now, and it's looking more and more like his time here might be running out. So, when you step back and look at everything that came out of this camp, from the offensive identity to the defensive scheme to the individual guys taking real steps forward, it's pretty clear this team looks fundamentally different than the one we watched the last few years. Let me know down in the comments which one of these storylines you're most locked in on heading into the season.